Excuse me. Wow, got quiet. Now, if I looked at the clock right, we've still got like 1, maybe 2 minutes before it's officially time, but if y'all are going to get quiet, I'll start. But maybe we'll wait just a minute. Tony has some handouts in case anybody didn't get one. And we are in Judges chapter 13 today. Judges chapter 13, and we're going to talk about the birth of Samson, but most of this talk is about his parents. So I'm going to read it first, and then we'll talk just a little bit about it. Now the sons of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord, so that the Lord gave them into the hands of the Philistines 40 years. There was a certain man of Zorah, of the family of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren and had borne no children. Then an angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, Behold now, you are barren and have borne no children, but you shall conceive and give birth to a son. Now therefore be careful not to drink wine or strong drink, nor eat anything unclean. For behold, you shall conceive and give birth to a son, and no razor shall come upon his head, for the boy shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb, and he shall begin to deliver Israel from the hands of the Philistines. Then the woman came and told her husband, saying, A man of God came to me, and his appearance was like the appearance of an angel of God, very awesome. And I did not ask him where he came from, nor did he tell me his name. But he said to me, Behold, you shall conceive and give birth to a son. Now you shall not drink wine or strong drink, nor eat any unclean thing, for the boy shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb to the day of his death. And then Manoah entreated the Lord and said, O Lord, please let the man of God whom you sent come to us again, that he may teach us what to do for the boy who is to be born. God listened to the voice of Manoah, and an angel of God came again to the woman as she was sitting in the field. But Manoah, her husband, was not with her. So the woman ran quickly and told her husband, Behold, the man who came to me the other day has appeared to me. Then Manoah arose and followed his wife. And when he came to the man, he said to him, Are you the man who spoke to the woman? And he said, I am. Manoah said, Now, when your words come to pass, what shall be the boy's mode of life and his vocation? So the angel of the Lord said to Manoah, Let the woman pay attention to all that I have said. She should not eat anything that comes from the vine, nor drink wine or strong drink, nor eat any unclean thing. Let her observe all that I commanded. Then Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, Please let us detain you so that we may prepare a young goat for you. The angel of the Lord said to Manoah, Though you detain me, I will not eat your food. But if you prepare a burnt offering, offer it to the Lord. For Manoah did not know that he was the angel of the Lord. Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, What is your name, so that when your words come to pass, we may honor you? But the angel of the Lord said to him, Why do you ask my name, seeing it is wonderful? So Manoah took the young goat with the grain offering and offered it on the rock to the Lord. And he performed wonders while Manoah and his wife looked on. For it came about, when the flame went up from the altar toward heaven, that the angel of the Lord ascended in the flame of the altar. When Manoah and his wife saw this, they fell on their faces to the ground. Now the angel of the Lord did not appear to Manoah or his wife again. Then Manoah knew that he was the angel of the Lord. So Manoah said to his wife, "We shall surely die, for we have seen God." But his wife said to him, "If the Lord had desired to kill us, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and a grain offering from our hands, nor would he have shown us all these things, nor would he have let us hear things like this at this time." Then the woman gave birth to a son and named him Samson. And the child grew up, and the Lord blessed him. And the Spirit of the Lord began to stir in him at Mahaneh-dan, between Zorah and Eshtaol. So we start here with the familiar line, "Again, Israel did evil in the eyes of the Lord." This is the 7th time that it's recorded, and I gave you those verses there. 7th time that this is recorded in the book of Judges. This is the last time that it's recorded in the book of Judges. The last time this statement is here, and the last judge is on the scene, or will be on the scene, and that, of course, is Samson. It could be, we don't really know, but it made me question, if you go back just a couple of chapters to chapter 10, when Jephthah is on the scene, it mentions an oppression that begins there, that God handed them over to the Philistines and the Ammonites. But then the entire discussion about Jephthah is dealing with the Ammonites. And he pretty much takes care of the Ammonites. But nothing is said about the Philistines. So I'm thinking that oppression is still the same one, because Jephthah and his army fought the Ammonites, and they took care of the Ammonites, but nothing was said about the Philistines. So I think, this is in my mind, that oppression started at the time of Jephthah, but it has continued. Now God is going to deal with, or begin to deal with, the oppression of the Philistines. And we know from history, they don't take care of the Philistines. This is one judge, the last judge, that does not deliver Israel from the oppressors. And the angel says that. He will begin to remove this oppression. This oppression does not go away until after there is a king in Israel. As a matter of fact, it's not even under Saul's time, but rather under David's time, when the Philistines are finally done in. As a matter of fact, there's a couple of cities that are renowned for the Philistines. One of those is Gath. And if you remember, there's a famous Philistine from Gath. Who would that be? You remember? What? Goliath, yeah. Yeah. And so that kind of rings in your head, and you go, oh yeah, I remember David having to, Saul's army was out there, and they're facing off with the Philistines, and David, of course, shows up and takes care of Goliath, and the battles begin. But it's not until after David is king that the Philistines are finally done in. So I'm thinking this is part of the same oppression that had started at the time of Jephthah. One with the Ammonites, one with the Philistines. Jephthah takes care, and his army takes care of the Ammonites. Philistine oppression is still there. It could be, and I don't really know, since none of these things are credited as being in chronological order necessarily, about Shamgar. Because you remember way back in chapter 3, Shamgar took on the Philistines with an ox goad and killed about 600 of them. Interesting thing about Samson, later he will take the jawbone of a donkey and kill 1,000 of them. So Shamgar, back in chapter 3, one of the early judges, not the earliest, because Othniel has that deal. But anyway, Shamgar, way back in chapter 3, doesn't have an army when he takes on the Philistines. And guess what? The last judge, Samson, he doesn't have an army either. But both of them use a common tool. Well, Shamgar, a common tool. I guess Samson, a somewhat common item, jawbone of an animal, and kills 1,000 of them. And before he's done, he will kill countless thousands when he collapses a temple. But he doesn't have an army. Neither does Shamgar. The Philistines were called a sea people. They were believed to have migrated from Greece to this area. So they're an Aryan race, not a Semitic race, as would be the Arabs and the Jews, but rather they are of European descent. And they occupied the coastal territory there of Canaan. And even back in Joshua, it was told in Joshua that the Canaanites, referring to those along the coast, the Philistines, Israelites couldn't push them out. So this is an ongoing thing, as we said, with these Philistines. They were known as being in 5 major cities: Ashdod, Gaza, Askelon, Gath, as I mentioned earlier with Goliath, and Ekron. 1 Samuel 6:17 talks about those times. So Samuel's time of judgment, which is spelled out in chapter 15, is 20 years. And it says there that it was during the oppression of, or during the time of the Philistines. So the Philistines have them for 40 years. Samson's judging, as it's called, takes place during that 40 years. And he judged Israel for 20 years. So what we're going to read about spans a 20-year period. Actually, a little bit longer than that, because it includes his birth. It's interesting, too, that in chapter 15, when Samson is wreaking all this havoc, the Jews come to him and say, "What is the matter with you? You know, things are not so bad. What are you trying to do?" And it kind of reminded me of Moses and the children of Israel, you know, about the time they're outside of Egypt and they see the army coming. "Oh, woe is me. We were better off in Egypt. We had it so good when we were slaves and we were making brick and we had to drown our kids in the river. We were just so much better off there. Why did you bring us out here into the wilderness to die?" Did you hear what you asked for? That's crazy. Well, that's kind of the way they are with him. You're bringing trouble on us, Samson. Knock it off. But of course he doesn't. The man Manoah, it says, is from Zorah, and that is a city within the territory of Dan. Joshua 19:41 assigns it to the tribe of Dan. Dan was actually the 5th son of Jacob. He was the first that was born not to Leah. If you remember, the first 4 sons were born to Leah, right? Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Those were all born to Leah. And then Rachel gets this brilliant idea: take my handmaid. And so Jacob does. And the firstborn to Bilhah is Dan. Dan, the word Dan, means to judge, or a judge. It's interesting, too, that the blessing that his dad would give him prior to his death was that he would judge his people. And a lot of the commentators tend to think that maybe this was an allusion to Samson coming later as a judge. I don't know. Maybe it is. Manoah actually means rest or quiet. He is the father of Samson and may not survive Samson, because at the tail end of chapter 16, when it talks about Samson dying, it says he is buried in the tomb of Manoah, his father. So I don't know if that's just a family tomb that he has and Manoah's not already there, but maybe, as a lot of commentators think, Manoah has already died and is buried in that tomb. Hence, it is his tomb. So this couple were childless at this point. The wife is said to be barren, so maybe it's her fault. Her body's fault. I don't know. We know in this day and age that the problem could lie with the mom, the problem could lie with the dad. But we don't really know that. But the double emphasis here may mean that that is the case. So an angel of the Lord appears to this woman, and he starts out by saying, "You're barren, and you're childless." maybe that's what rings in her head, that he is a man of God. Because then of course, he proceeds to tell her that she's going to conceive, she'll bear a son, and he will be a Nazarite. And she is to guard herself from anything to do with the vine, anything to do with food that was not approved for the Jews to eat, and that she would not cut this kid's hair. You remember in John chapter 4, when Jesus goes kind of through Samaria trying to get up to Galilee, he stops at a well, his disciples disappear, this woman comes, and he speaks to this woman, and during that conversation, she says she has no husband, and he says, you're right, you've had 5 husbands, and the guy you're living with now is not your husband. And she perceives that he is a prophet. And she goes into town and tells everybody, this guy has told me everything that I have ever done. I don't know that he did that, but that's the way she expresses it to them. He's told me everything that I've ever done. Could he be the one? She's perceptive. Well, this lady is perceptive too. She goes and tells her husband that this man of God came to her, and he told her that she would have a son, and that he would be a Nazarite from birth, and that she would have restrictions on her as well. She's given strict instructions of what to eat, and what to drink, and what to stay away from. And he's told he'd be a Nazarite from the womb. And so his hair is not going to be cut. The Nazarite is a vow that anybody could take. Man, woman, rich, poor, master, slave, it does not matter. Anybody could take a vow as a Nazarite. Typically, it was a limited time period. But there's nothing specified in Scripture that says you shall have X number of days as a Nazarite. Jewish tradition is 30 days, or 60 days, or 90 days, kind of a multiple of 30, or up to 100 days. There are 3 that are recorded in Scripture as being lifetime. This guy, Samson, Samuel, coming up later, his mom kind of makes that vow for him, although not directed by an angel. And then, of course, John the Baptist, also directed by an angel, but also from before his birth onward. So those 3 are believed to be the only that have a lifetime commitment as a Nazarite. But that may not be. There could have been others. But those are the 3 that are recorded in Scripture. And she is told, too, that her son would begin the deliverance of Israel from the Philistines. And like I said earlier, it doesn't happen until after the days of Samuel and David. So a Nazarite, chapter 6 of Numbers lays out the entirety of what there is about Nazarite. Nazarite vow was not one that was required. It was an optional kind of thing. You could take it or not take it. But it's like other things, like a vow even that we talked about a couple weeks ago. If you take it, then God has set out some rules for it. And one of those was the hair would not be cut until the conclusion of the vow. And it would be cut at the temple, or in this particular case, the tabernacle. And that hair would be offered with the peace offering. There were a series of offerings that had to take place at the conclusion of the vow. So the first 8 verses lay out the requirement of the vow. The next few verses deal with what happens if there's a violation of the vow. How do you recover and start over? And your time starts over too, whatever that time would be. And then the last part deals with the sacrifices that would be offered at the conclusion of the vow. So when that time is over, here are the requirements for you to conclude the vow. And like I said, it is voluntary, but it's just a little bit like what we do. The church is what? We are the called out. We are the separated from. We are the assembly of God's people. And it is a voluntary acceptance of this vow, but it's a lifetime commitment too. From the point that we accept this vow, There is no end date. We don't do a 30, 60, 90-day kind of thing that says, I'll be a Christian for that long, and then that vow's concluded, and we're out of it. In 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 9 through 12, Peter tells us there, we are a chosen race. We are a royal priesthood. We are God's people. Therefore, we should abstain from things of this world. He also tells us in Ephesians 5, 15 through 21, that as people of God, we are to not get filled up with wine, but rather what? Filled up with His Spirit. And therefore, we are to abstain from certain things in this world. The choice is ours, but it is a lifetime commitment as well. You remember when Jesus was talking in the crowd, they were kind of upset with Him because he was doing all kinds of things that they didn't think were right. And Jesus tells him, it's in Matthew chapter 11, verses 16 through 19. He says, we played a funeral song for you, you did not mourn. We played a happy song for you, you did not dance. And then he steps into the next one. He says, John came, he did not eat, he did not drink, and you said he has a demon. The Son of Man comes eating and drinking, and you say he is a gluttonous drunkard and hangs out with tax collectors and sinners. You guys really can't figure it out, can you? You need to pay attention. John wanted you to mourn your sin. I want you to celebrate your salvation. You're not doing either one. Since John didn't meet your standard, you didn't agree with him. I don't meet your standard, you're not agreeing with me. You guys need to figure it out. That's kind of the way we are too. We need to figure it out. So anyway, the big things about a Nazirite vow, abstinence of wine, strong drink, or anything associated with the vine. That include eating grapes or raisins. Anything that had anything to do with the vine was totally off limits when you've got the Nazirite vow. The second thing is there's no cutting of hair until the conclusion of the vow. Unless, of course, the vow has been violated, in which case the hair is cut and then you start that process and the timing all over again. And then the third is no contact with the dead. So an individual who has been, and this means that you can't bury your mom and dad, or your spouse. During this time, you have no contact with the dead. Three things were unusual about Samson and this vow. The first is he didn't take it voluntarily, and yet it's normally a voluntary vow. Instead, it was done by his parents before his birth. The second thing is it was not for a limited time. Typically it was, and the individual would say when he is accepting the vow how long it's going to be, and that time would be set. For him, it was lifetime. And a third thing is Samson broke every one of the restrictions. Isn't that sad? That's sad. But he did. So the woman runs to her husband. She tells him that a man of God came to me and he told me some very important things, but he looked like an angel. I thought that was interesting. A man of God came to me and he told me all these things, but he looked like an angel. That was his appearance. So he was very awesome. And I didn't ask him where he came from, but he didn't say. He didn't tell me his name, but then I didn't ask. She adds, I think, until his death. Now, maybe that was implied by what the angel said, but if you look back, the angel doesn't say until his death. It just says from his birth, he will be a Nazirite. The term man of God is typically used for a prophet. In Deuteronomy chapter 33, verse 1, where it talks there about Moses, you remember Moses would say later, there's a prophet coming after me who is like me. Speaking, of course, about Jesus coming later. So it is applied to Moses in that particular sense. In 1 Samuel chapter 2, it's applied to a man who came to Eli and told Eli, your line is going to cease. And you'll know this because both your sons are going to die in the same day. In 1 Samuel chapter 9, verse 6, when Saul is looking for Samuel, he is referred to as the man of God. And in 1 Kings 17, Elijah is referred to there as a man of God. So typically it's applied to a prophet. That's who she thought she was dealing with, was a prophet. So her husband then prays. You've got to admire this couple. They are God-fearing, God-believing people. He prays that God would send this man of God back to him so that they can find out how to raise him. God not only hears their prayer, but also sends this angel back. And then Manoah asked this question. And it's interesting, too, he says, when your words are fulfilled, what will be the rule for the boy's life and work? I'm not sure if that's the same question. And in his prayer, he asked, how shall we raise him? Now that he's talking directly to the angel, he says, what is going to be his life, his rule of life, and his work? To me, that's a different question. And maybe he's asking the same thing, just a different way. I don't know. But it sounds like a different question to me, and the angel doesn't answer. Right? What does the angel say? The angel says to the woman, you do exactly what I told you to do before. Now, I don't know. I mean, you got to give Manoah credit. He does believe what the angel has said, because he says, when your words are fulfilled, what will be the mode of life and the work? So Manoah is in agreement that this is going to take place. He believes this man of God, as he thinks him to be, or the angel as we know him to be. So he believes that. You remember in John chapter 21 when Jesus is talking with Peter and he's telling him, if you love me, feed my sheep. If you love me, take care of my lambs. And about the third time, Peter turns around, he says, but point at John, he said, but what about him? And Jesus says what? Don't worry about him. If I want him to live until I get back, what's that to you? You follow me. Well, I think that's what the angel's saying here. You guys don't worry about what's coming later. We'll tell Samson what we want Samson to know. You do what you've been told. You follow me. So Manoah then says, okay, well, how about if we prepare you a goat? You know, hospitality was a big thing then, it's a big thing now. We're told in Romans chapter 12 to practice hospitality. Hebrews 11, or 13 rather, we're told to honor each other as brothers and to not neglect entertaining strangers, because some have entertained angels in the process. And in Matthew chapter 24, Jesus tells us that when you do things like this for the least of these, you have done it to me. So, hospitality, big thing then, big thing for us too. Gideon prepared a meal for an angel, right? That didn't go the way he planned. Same way with Abraham and Sarah. They prepared a meal for 3 angels who apparently ate. They didn't refuse to eat as this. So that takes place. So the angel says, no, I'm not going to eat. So then he says, you can offer it as a burnt offering for God. Then Manoah says, well, what's your name? Then when these things take place, we can honor you. The angel's like, no, that ain't happening. Instead, he says, I can't tell you my name. It's beyond your comprehension. Isn't that interesting? There's something said here. It's translated wonderful in a lot of our Bibles, but the note in the New American Standard says it's incomprehensible. The footnote in the ESV says it is too wonderful to comprehend, so it's not revealed. The New King James, I say, just says it is wonderful. God is the only one that's be honored. God is doing this, so he is the one that is going to get that. If you remember when Jacob wrestled with an angel back in Genesis chapter 32, he asked the angel his name. The angel said, no, you're not getting my name. In the next verse, in verse 19, Manoah took this goat, and grain, and decides to offer a burnt offering and a grain offering as the angel had suggested. And the Lord did amazing things while Manoah and his wife watched. That is the same word that is translated there, amazing things, as the angel has said about his name. It is too amazingly wonderful for you to comprehend. That's exactly what is happening here. There is something truly amazingly wonderful that is taking place right here as the sacrifice is being consumed. Now, I don't know if it was just that angel converting to whatever he did and going up with the smoke as it apparently happened, or if there were other things that the Lord did while that was taking place before the angel went up with the smoke. But it's the same word that is used there. So I find that one truly amazing. Well, Manoah says, well, we're doomed to die. We've seen God. Now, the same kind of thing happened with Gideon when the angel disappeared there. When his sacrifice was consumed and the angel disappeared, Gideon was sure he was going to die. But the Lord actually told Gideon, don't worry, you're not going to die. If you remember back in Exodus chapter 33, when Moses wanted to see God, what did God tell him? Can't. You can't see me and live. No man can see me and live. And so God put him in a cleft of a rock, right? Covered him up and passed by, so that all Moses could see was his glory after he had passed by, because he would have been consumed otherwise. John 1:18, no man has ever seen God except the one and only begotten who is at the Father's side. He has made him known to us. But, as Blake is going to get to in the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Manoah's wife, I think, is probably more spiritually grounded than her husband, because she then tells him, no, that's not the case. We're not going to die. If God wanted to kill us, he would have killed us already. And it doesn't make sense that God would accept a burnt offering from us. He would accept a grain offering from us and then kill us. It doesn't make sense that he would have sent this man of God that we now know is an angel, that he would have sent this angel to tell us all of these things if he was going to kill us. And he would not let us know that he has plans for us to deliver a son if he's going to kill us. So none of that makes sense. And she's right. The last verse, the woman then gives birth to a boy and named him Samson. He grew, and the Lord blessed him, and the Spirit of the Lord began to stir in him. It's interesting that it says here that the woman gave birth to the boy and named him. She named him. She's the one that knew they weren't going to die. She's the one that calmed Manoah down. She's the one, of course, that gave birth to the son, but she is the one that named him. I think based on these last three verses, as I said, I think the woman was probably more spiritually grounded than Manoah, even though we know he is a God-fearing man. He is the one that prayed to God, and he is the one that specified or stated that he believed the angel's message when these things come to pass. So, I think also that's the reason the angel appeared to the woman twice. Isn't that interesting? He didn't appear to Manoah even after Manoah had asked God to send this man back, but rather to the woman. So the other thing, too, that's worth noting, no other judge has a birth story recorded in the book of Judges, only Samson. No other judge is said to have been blessed as a child other than Samson. No other judge is said to be stirred as a young man by the Holy Spirit, only Samson. 3 other judges are said to have the Spirit of the Lord come upon them, but only 3. 4 times we're going to find the Spirit of the Lord comes on Samson. Only 1. So, we've got 3 more chapters now to deal with Samson. Thank you very much for your attention today, and we'll pick up again next week.